warmer during the cool season. And I actually have a brand new used greenhouse here on the property that I've been shifting into using. We use old upcycled windows to create that. So yeah, there are a lot of possibilities with how to protect your tender greens when they're growing out there.
And also how to grow things differently, like growing tomatoes in an upside down tomato plant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one. And you know, we talk about doing tomatoes, but there are some other plants. You can also do peppers and such. The whole idea with doing the upside down tomato, I don't know if you're familiar. What's the tomato tumbler or something? There's a product that you can buy, and this is just a way to make your own with a 5-gallon bucket, and it's a way for people who are living on gardening space to utilize the vertical space in their patio area and hang food that they grow in there.
Another area that I think is going to be very I guess that's referring to the house, just being able to clean your house with things
yeah, they're less toxic. You know, there's this idea out there, and I'm not an expert on it at all, but there's this idea of body burden. And essentially what that means is that over the course of our lifetime, as we breathe in or ingest different toxins, that kind of hangs on with our body, and our body becomes a little bit more polluted over time. And so, you know, knowing that every little thing, lotion that we use, or air freshener that we breathe all day long, that's all
0.
Well, hi everyone, and welcome once again to the JMOR Tech Talk Show. This is John C. Morley, your host, and it is so great to be here on another wonderful Friday. Marcus, it is great to see you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing outstanding, John. Good to see you.
Well, that's good. You know, we have a great show here tonight. We have an amazing guest tonight, Kris Bordessa from Hawaii will be joining us, and I can't wait to speak with her about her brand new book, Attainable, Sustainable. So we'll be getting that a little bit later in the program, but let's talk about some of the changes that are happening. Now, for those of you that use LinkedIn, now LinkedIn is a business networking platform, but what I want to let you know is that LinkedIn is starting to crack down on many people that are starting to spam. They actually added a brand new restriction that only allows 100 connection requests per week. It's not a lot.
No, not at all.
And if you send someone a connection request, and let's just say that they click on the I don't know you, well, that's actually not going to be very good for you, because if you get too many of those, your reputation score with LinkedIn is going to really take a tumble. Wow. So my advice for you is that when you're using LinkedIn, you know, don't always send connection requests to people unless you know them and they're actually expecting a connection request from you. Now, what you can do is send in-mail requests, and you only get 5 of those if you're a premium member. However, you can send in-mail to those that are open profile members, and you can look up that in LinkedIn very easily. And when you send someone a LinkedIn message through the in-mail, it doesn't take the same, let's say, situations or requirements that would happen when you do it through the actual connection request. So don't send people connection requests if you don't know who they are. That's spam, and no one actually likes that.
No, not at all.
But something else that's happening right now in the news is virtual tourism. Many places are starting to offer, yes, virtual touring packages. Can you believe this? I mean, now you're going to be able to literally go traveling virtually, presenting viewers with these immersive experiences to basically feel like they're in another surrounding, country, location. and really experience it. I mean, this is something because everyone's been so cooped up, with the pandemic and all. And so virtual tourism packages can range from a couple $100s, and they can go all the way up to thousands of dollars, depending on how intricate you want the experience to be and where you're going to be going. So you're going to have, great video. You'll have sound. You'll have some other experiences, and some of them are even in 3D. And now with the virtual reality, virtual tourism, this is really changing the way people are going to be moving around the country. So I think this is very interesting. Now you can travel the entire world right from the comfort, privacy, and safety of your own chair at home or at your desk in the office between your coffee breaks, right?
You're right.
Well, our next guest is a real treat. She comes to us all the way from Hawaii. Yes, Hawaii. Kris Bordessa is a freelance writer who spends much of her time thinking about greener living. And she writes primarily about home, garden, travel, and of course, Hawaii. Her latest book, Attainable, Sustainable, it's a modern guide to traditional living. National Geographic launched this with an online presence nearing over 700,000 in 2020. And she has many social media channels. She provides guidance and topics as diverse as home cooking, canning, gardening, and raising chickens, in effect to encourage her readers to embrace a more self-reliant lifestyle. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome to the JMOR Tech Talk Show, Miss Kris Bordessa. Well, hi, everyone. It's John C. Morley with the JMOR Tech Talk Show, and I'm very pleased to have Kris Bordessa with us all the way out from Hawaii, if I understand that correctly.
Yep, that's
right?
correct.
How is the weather out there today in Hawaii?
It's a little chilly, which, East Coast people will laugh about, but we're just right about 50 today.
Right about 50? Okay, that's a nice temperature. I'm going to be jealous and say I'd like that temperature. Well, we're going to be talking, in case you guys didn't know, about Kris's book that's out. Beautiful book. It's a hardcover book. We'll have more information down on the site, so you'll be able to find it very easily. So I have to ask you, Kris, what got you motivated to want to create this particular book?
Well, a couple of things actually. Actually, prior to the book was the website. I started with the website first. So horse before the cart thing. And the thing that prompted me to start it initially was speaking with a friend of mine who was a very, very smart, bright woman, and it came about in conversation that she did not know that radishes grew underground. And I thought, if we've got people in the world, smart people in the world who aren't getting that, who don't realize that, we have a little bit of a problem. And that's something that I had some knowledge about. So I thought, let's see if we can get this out into the world and see how much people need to know this sort of thing. And it's, obviously it goes way beyond the idea of radishes, but it's just a matter of being connected to our food.
Interesting. Now, you provide a lot of insight in your book, and it's basically like a guide, almost like it's like a directory, if you will, of so many things from how to cook things. There's recipes in there. There's some tips. So it's not a book you're going to read cover to cover, but there's a lot of very great recipes. What I want to ask you is, what would you say are some things you could share with us about, cooking and baking from scratch? Because I think that's becoming a concern of a lot of people that are very health conscious right now. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I think you're correct on that. I think that people are trying to really shift to a little bit cleaner diet. So, I think the obvious thing is knowing what you're putting in your shopping cart at the grocery store and being aware of that and figuring out if there are ways that you can alter that a little bit. If you're constantly buying the same salad dressing, just as an example, that is, filled with nasty ingredients and comes in a plastic bottle that you could just as soon avoid. maybe think about, can I make that at home? Is it something, and that's something a lot of people don't think about, that they can actually make salad dressing at home. But that's just one example of, something that people can do and make the changes at home.
Now, just like that concept you brought to us, you teach us a lot of things, and we can't go through every single one of them, but there was one particular one that I liked in the book, and you illustrate the difference between canning, pickling, and fermenting foods. Can you give us a high level of that for our viewers?
I can. I can. Canning involves, essentially creating your own canned goods at home. It just is like you buy your canned tomatoes at the supermarket, and that involves processing foods in a canner. And there are a couple of different methods for doing that. It's requires some special equipment, and it requires some special safety concerns, but it's not difficult, and it's something that people can do at home. I always recommend people start with jam and jelly as a starting point, because that's an easy one to do. Canning, that's canning. Fermenting is the idea of taking our food and doing something that we've been told for our whole lives that we don't do, and that's leaving it out on the counter. And when we leave our food out on the counter and do that with a salt or a salt brine, that food ferments, and that extends the shelf life of the food. It's not shelf stable. It does need to be kept cold, but it will will last for months and months, rather than say cauliflower going bad in a week or two. And then the third is dehydrating. I think that dehydrating.
Fermenting.
I just said fermenting.
Fermenting. So it was actually canning, pickling, and fermenting. So I think it was pickling, right?
So, sorry, I'm thinking of all the different food preservation methods. Pickling is the concept of keeping vegetables for longer by processing them in a vinegar brine, and that can be canned so that it's shelf stable, or those can also be just like refrigerator pickles, and that can be done with a variety of vegetables.
I want to bring something to the attention of our viewers. So when a lot of people heard me at the beginning and I said there's a lot of recipes in this book, this is not just a cookbook. It is actually called Attainable, Sustainable, The Lost Art of Self-Reliant Living. And there's a lot of other things that you share in there, that it's not just about food, is it? It's really about your whole entire life and different things you're doing. Like crafting is another one, isn't it? Jumping in and doing a little bit more handcrafted kinds of projects, which I kind of like to call the heart projects, because they're things that we're doing to, kind of feed our soul a little bit. There are some of those sorts of projects in there. I like to, just encourage people to be a little bit more hands-on and start doing some of the making that we've gotten away from. With our the recent generations are not doing as much making as possible. Now, something else that I found pretty interesting, your book, the contents, actually has the table of contents, and it actually has the words eat, make, clean, grow, farm, and trek. And they're all in colors, which I thought was kind of unique how you did that. So can you just give us a quick rundown of what each one of these chapters means in the book, and what's really in each one of these chapters for our viewers?
Yeah, when we were creating the book, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to break it down into kind of manageable bites, so people could decide what they wanted to focus on or work on. And we started with the eat, which, the common sense place to start in making changes in a household is in the kitchen, because that's where a lot of the waste is created, as far as plastic waste and single-use plastic kinds of things, like I mentioned with the salad dressing, but then getting people cooking again. So we brought people into the kitchen for that. Make is the crafting that we talked about, and in that section we talk about one of my favorite things is the quilting portion of it, making quilts and handcraft stuff. Clean, I tell you, we had a hard time deciding what to call that chapter, because we talk about clean, and it includes a little bit of personal care. It also includes house cleaning, so that we're eliminating the toxins both from our home and from our bodies and what we're consuming. And then we shift into the second section, which is the outside section. And that section is garden, farm, and trek, as you said. And in the gardening section, we talk about growing some of our own food. And that includes stuff that can be done, urban farming, backyard gardening, that sort of thing. And then farm is a little bit more in depth, where we talk about maybe adding some small animals to the mix for eggs or their manure or what have you. All pretty simple stuff. And then in trek is really just our effort at getting people to get outdoors and spend some time, hiking on a park trail or paying attention to what's happening in the weather or the tree leaves and such. So yeah, that was that's kind of how we broke it down. I see the book as kind of a guide for people to choose what they want to get started with.
It's like a reference. So it's not just a cookbook. It's
Right.
not a book you're going to read from cover to cover. You're going to reference it as you want to do different things. But the chapter that I like the most, I love what you've done in the make chapter. I mean, candle making, oil lamps, dyeing, rainbow of natural dyes, sewing. You mentioned the patchwork and the quilting, waste-free food storage, wool felting, basket making, macrame, leatherwork, mosaics, block printing. So when you talk about, let's take block printing, for example, are you basically asking people to build their own kind of very similar to like a Lego block and kind of stamp it, be like a rubber stamp? Am I on the right track with that?
Yes, very much. Kind of like it would be, in a sense, creating your own rubber stamp, and that can be done. There are all kinds of different materials that you can do that with. That you can purchase special material at art supply stores in order to carve your pattern. So you're doing a little bit of the negative image, and then that's going to be transferred to paper, by a stamp. But it can be done with simple things that you have at home too, or recycled things. If you are somebody who purchases meat on styrofoam trays, those trays can be used as a kind of a stamp. And you also can use a potato.
The potato, I've heard of that once before. I think we did that in high school or grammar school. We
Yeah.
did some type of experiment, and that kind of rings some bells. When I think back to the days about candle making, everyone always kind of pulls their hair out when they're doing that. How hard is it actually to make a candle?
Well, I think it depends what kind of candle you're talking about making. It depends, because there are poured candles, which are, essentially it's just a matter of melting the wax and setting your wick down into a vessel. And then there are dipped candles, and the dipped candle process is a little bit more intense, because that's essentially dipping the wick into the melted wax, and each time you dip, you have to pull the wax out, the wick out of the wax and allow that to cool. And so you're essentially just adding layers to it as you go. So it's a little bit more time intensive. It's not difficult. It's a little bit more time intensive.
I love things like, talking about the soap making. I mean, you just pull out some very interesting things, and then people can make their own body lotions and soap. You show people how to do that. And also you put something in there about natural hair care. That one really caught my eyes.
Natural hair care is hard. That's a little bit of a difficult one. And I've talked to so many people about this, because, people are very concerned about their hair. And, we've all got our favorite shampoo products and such. But they also come with a lot of different chemical products. So, it's a very, it's kind of one of those changes that if people are interested in diving in and making some changes to their routine, a little bit of experiment necessary. Everybody's hair is different. Everybody's the texture, the color, all that is all very different for people. So yeah, it's definitely one you're going to have to experiment with.
You cover this real plethora of areas. I mean, it's not just like black and white. There are so many different things. I mean, I think I've had the book for a while, and I still haven't digested everything in the book. There are so many amazing original ideas, even household pest control. to
Yeah.
make things that are just more friendly, and even air fresheners. So
Yeah.
these are a lot of like family projects that I guess you can do with your loved ones or your friends and whatnot. And then, the outdoors, there's been books about outdoors and growth, but the thing I think you bring to the table is that you not only talk about the actual plant and a little bit about its heritage, but you also go into things like whether planting beans or zucchini is healthy for you. So I guess what I like about your garden section is that you don't just talk about the plant or, what it has, but you talk about how it grows and things like that. And you don't always see that from a lot of books that talk about gardening. They just talk about the tomato or they talk about the lettuce. They don't really get into what makes it grow.
Yeah. I think that we've tried to give people a real overview of what is possible in a garden and how things will grow. And, whether that's, one of the things I talk about in there is embracing the idea of composting, because every kitchen sends so much waste into the landfill. And, rather than throwing those kitchen scraps out, we can take that and turn that into a compost, which is just a wonderful, wonderful thing to add to a garden. And you're eliminating that waste then.
I love another point that you bring up in the book. You mentioned things about small animals and that you can actually raise them like chickens in the backyard. So tell us a little bit about that. I found that a little interesting.
Chickens. I have had chickens for many, many years now, and I love introducing people to chickens. In fact, I'm crossing my fingers that my rooster doesn't make an appearance here today. A chicken, and people are always hesitant and worried about what their what chickens require, and they are so easy. It's just once you get them to the point that they're beyond that chick stage where they do need extra light, and they're actual grown hens, they're just out there doing their thing and pecking around and eating bugs, and you feed them a couple of times a day. Super, super easy, and they give you eggs. It's a comic show out there, really.
How about the fact that you talk about herbal medicines? What's one of your favorite herbal medicines to make?
Yeah, one of the ones that we use here pretty regularly, and because it's something that we have access to, as I said, I'm in Hawaii, we use turmeric a lot. We grow fresh turmeric out in the yard, and those fresh roots, most people would have it available to them as a powder form, and that is actually in the spice section in the grocery store. But it's good for inflammation. So anytime anybody's feeling just a little bit punk, we will make a fresh tea with the actual live turmeric root. That's one of my favorites.
They were saying a while back that, if you have certain herbal things a day, you can actually be healthier, from turmeric to some people actually were told to put cinnamon on their cereal to actually, I guess, stir up the heart a little bit more. Not crazy, but just a little bit. And I guess these things can help the body.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there in the world that I think is, certainly some of our modern medicines have been kind of precursed by the herbals. So I think there's a lot of stuff out there that, I think even still to learn about.
And then you go into quite a few pages about tapping trees for syrup. I found that pretty interesting.
There's the whole book is, I like to say that it's a kind of an introduction, if you will, to some of these different methods and ideas, and that people, what I hope people will do is see that some of these changes are possible. They can start embracing some of these more self-reliant skills, and then they can decide, do I want to delve more deeply into quilt making? Am I really interested in canning food? And then, from there they can grow. But basically it's an overview and kind of a look at some of these things that people can try.
You even in one chapter talk about how to build your own greenhouse.
Yeah. There's I don't have instructions for a full-size greenhouse in there. We have Cold frame, which is an easier way to create something to keep your tender plants warmer during the cool season. And I actually have a brand new used greenhouse here on the property that I've been shifting into using. We used old upcycled windows to create that. So yeah, there are a lot of possibilities with how to protect your tender greens when they're growing out there.
And also how to grow things differently, like growing tomatoes in an upside down tomato planter.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one. And we talk about doing tomatoes, but there are some other plants. You could also do peppers and such. The whole idea with doing the upside down tomato, I don't know if you're familiar. What's the tomato tumbler or something? There's a product that you can buy, and this is just a way to make your own with a 5-gallon bucket. And it's a way for people who are limited on gardening space to to utilize that vertical space in their patio area and hang food and have it growing there.
Another area that I think is going to be very interesting to a lot of our viewers is the section on clean. I guess that's referring to a lot with the house and just being able to clean your house with things that are going to be organically friendly.
Yeah, they're less toxic. There's this idea out there, and I'm not an expert on it at all, but there's this idea of body burden. And essentially what that means is that over the course of our lifetime, as we breathe in or ingest different toxins, that kind of hangs on with our body, and our body becomes a little bit more polluted over time. And so, knowing that every little thing, lotion that we use, or air freshener that we breathe all day long, that's all kind of adding to our body burden. Yeah, that kind of makes people think, or it makes me think anyway, that it's shifting into something that's a little bit cleaner. It's certainly not going to hurt. So I do have in there, recipes for substituting some of the things out, and shifting into a cleaner product.
And you also talked about how you grow things in space. You have something called the salad tower, so they can grow multiple, I guess, plants in a very small area, whether you're in a condo or an apartment or what have you. People can actually grow their own stuff. I also like what you talked about with the fruit juice. What particular fruit juice is the easiest to make?
You mean the extracting the fruit juice?
Yes.
Probably the easiest to make. Probably I guess I would go with grape. Grape, because grapes are very soft. You're trying to extract apple juice. That takes a little bit more. That's a firmer fruit and is going to require being shredded and then pressed. Whereas grapes are soft already, and it's going to be pretty easy for people to extract that. The other one that's easy is passion fruit, but that's probably not something that most people have available to them.
Whenever somebody does something like this, tries to be healthier or maybe has different alternatives in life, I think safety is definitely a key point. And there's something that you started to talk about. I believe it's in the Canning at Home chapter,
Right.
The science of canning safety. So can you elaborate a little bit on that for us?
Yeah. When we're canning at home and taking a product and making it shelf stable, there are some processes that need to happen. And with canning, there are actually two different processes to choose from. One is called a water bath canning process, and that process is essentially taking your sealed jars of food and boiling them in water to a certain amount of time. Foods that are high in acid can be processed that way, and that's it's mostly what I grew up with doing. That's your tomatoes and your fruit and such, and that it's a simple process, some simpler process, I guess. When you start talking about doing foods that are lower acid, and that includes things like canning green beans, not pickling green beans, because adding vinegar makes them more acidic. But if we're talking about canning green beans, we're talking about processing meats, those sorts of things need to be pressure canned, and that involves a specific type of equipment called a pressure canner. The electric Instant Pot pressure cookers are not the same. It's a little bit different, but that requires a little bit more commitment, I guess. So, my suggestion for this, it's all doable. I do both. And but my suggestion for that is for people to get started with something that can be a water bath canned item and get comfortable with the idea of how the jars work, because the jars are glass jars. They have special rings and lids, and there are rules as far as that goes too. You can't reuse the lids, but you can reuse the rings. So I go into that a little bit in the book, talking about the safety of that. So I recommend people start with the water bath canning as a first step.
When you think about a farm and a lot of the livestock on the farm, there's something you don't hear about in a lot of books, and that's the pollinating and the beekeeping. I thought that was interesting that you put a few pages in about that.
Yeah, the idea, there are a lot of people afraid of bees. And the idea of keeping bees is something that, farmers have been doing for, forever and ever. But a lot of people don't realize is, okay, there are honeybees, but there are a lot of other bees out there that help to pollinate the fruits and vegetables. And if you've got those bees or birds or butterflies in your garden, your fruit is going to be more successful. You'll be more fruitful with that. And another thing that people can do as far as encouraging those, certainly you don't want to be using any kind of poisons in the garden that could kill the pollinators, the friendlies as we call them. Is that don't use those, and plant flowers so that the bees and the butterflies and the different pollinators are more attracted to your garden. So there, if you've got a vegetable garden, there's nothing saying that you can't plant flowers in there with them. So those two things can work really well together in a garden.
You also go into pretty deep detail about how to compost. You give us the lists of the nitrogen as well as the carbon materials. And is that pretty much it? You just have to keep them in those two piles and it happens, or is there more to composting than that?
Okay, so here's the thing that I tell people, and I do like composting. Composting is a little bit of a passion for me, as I said earlier, because you're avoiding wasting a lot of stuff that could be good for your garden. Compost happens, and compost happens all the time in nature without anybody doing anything. So there are a lot of people who are very intent on their composting, and they turn their compost all the time, and they work it, and it's a whole process for them. And I hope they enjoy it, and it's great. Working your compost makes it ready and more usable more quickly. But doing that level of composting is a lot of work. I tend to be more of a lazy composter, and essentially that means, when I've got this kitchen waste or yard leaves or newspaper, it's going into the compost pile. I'm not necessarily doing anything extra for it. So yeah, it's just essentially layered in there. I do vermicomposting, which is also it's essentially using worms to do the composting work for me, and that's another thing that I've got both going on. And the worm castings or worm poop is just delicious for plants. So, that's another way to do it. And actually in the book, there is a instruction for making a 5-gallon bucket vermicomposting bin.
There's just there's a wealth of information. The last thing I want to bring to our readers' attention, because we're almost out of time, and viewers' attention here tonight, is the ability and I guess the benefits of making your own fire with firewood.
Right. We talk about that, and it's funny. A lot of people, I think about, especially people who live in the city, don't have access to, I guess, much opportunity to build a fire. So, this was in the outdoor section. We wanted to get people out there, camping or for, gosh, we had, a situation in Texas recently when people needed to get warm, and I hope those people knew how to start a fire. So we talk about the different ways of stacking the firewood and how to get a hot fire going. And, this is, again, one of those things that's a little bit experimental. People have to, it's very hard to just tell somebody, here's how you build a fire. You really have to get out there with your wood and do it. And in fact, it's something that my kids learned from a young age. We camped a lot. And when they were young, we would, put them in charge of, you go and stack the campfire.
This resonates very strong with me, Kris, because I'm an Eagle Scout. I remember, when you go out there and they would give you one match.
Right.
You have to be able to light the fire with one match. And it was a windy day. So you would have to have people standing around. You got one match.
Right.
If you didn't light the fire with that one match, well, then you weren't going to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the thing. Now we did help them if they didn't get the fire started. But the point was that it had this fear that you weren't going to eat. And eventually we did let them eat. The way I started my fire was with flint and steel and a battery and steel wool.
Mm-hmm.
Those were my ways of doing it. You can use the rubbing of the sticks. That takes a very, very long time.
Lots of patience. Yeah. Yeah.
Lots of patience. But any kind of little spark or something. But the flint and steel was a very simple way to have the kindle just catch on fire and then from that to grow. But when it was a windy day, very hard to start a fire when it's windy.
Yeah, with one match, certainly.
With one match, and that's why I realized that you need to have more than you have to have the spark. You're getting it on there, and you have to get the tiny timbers to ignite, and then they light the larger logs. But you really have to get those timbers going for a couple minutes, and then once they're on fire, then you can move away, and then the other ones start. But there's a lot in there, so I think of the Trek chapter like the scouting chapter.
There you go. I like that. Maybe we should have said scout instead of Trek.
But I really like it. So again, if you are looking to be more adventurous or looking to provide more sustainability in our world, a good way to do that is to be conscious of where you're throwing your trash and what you're making and what you're buying. Because so many things we're doing every day and getting them, they're actually costing ourselves more money. In fact, 95% of things you buy have a recycle fee of somewhere over 50% of the product. Amazon does this. Most people don't know it, but 80 to 90% of the items are never returned to any part of the Amazon distributor that actually sold it to Amazon. They're actually just disposed of.
Yeah.
I remember on one story where they tracked a pair of jeans that went around the whole world pretty much until it went to a place finally. So, that's why they have these, I guess, higher costs because of that reason. Very interesting, like I said, a reference book about eating, making, cleaning, growing, farming, trekking, and just being able to do things that, maybe you thought were hard. They're like little mini projects, and you can just, pick one up and decide to do it. But again, don't try to read the entire book in one day. That's what I tried to do.
Not a novel.
You can't do that because you're not going to comprehend everything. There's a lot of valuable information. Kris, it was a pleasure to have you on the show this evening. Thank you very, very much. And before I let you go, what else is in store for Kris? Is there another book? Is there something else you're working on?
Well, there may be another book in my future. That is yet to be determined. I am currently getting ready to launch a short course on gardening for beginner gardeners who are interested in learning how to grow food in containers at home.
That is amazing. I think we definitely need more education when it comes to being more sustainable in our lives, because I think we just rely on the masses and the production, and we just throw things away. Other than most of us recycle, but some people you go to, it's like, what's recycling? I'm like, well, we have our plastics, we have our. And my friends come over, they're like, what are you talking about? Well, no, we have recycling in our place.
But the problem with that too is that so much of the recycling, especially the plastic these days, is becoming really kind of charged and difficult to get done. There's a lot of stuff we can't even recycle here on the island. Plastic. So if I bring it home, it goes to the trash.
And that's a cost not only for us in dollars and cents, but also in the cost of our ecosystem and our precious resources that are unfortunately dwindling away. Well, Kris, this is an amazing reference book, is what I'm going to call it, with many fun activities for the family to be able to partake in, to actually start caring for our world and caring for ourselves.
Right.
So again, I thank you very much for taking time out of your day or your night there in Hawaii to visit with us. Definitely a pleasure. And when you have another book or something else, definitely come back to us. We would love to talk to you more about it.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Well, Marcus, what did you think about that? I mean, her book is a reference, or really an encyclopedia, of a lot of different things that can help us in our life, from cooking to the canning to making things around the home, and just really living off the land. I was really impressed by the detail that she went into, and how there's so many things, from even getting the honey from the bees. I mean, she went into everything very intricately. I know you learned a lot. I definitely did.
Definitely learned
and
a lot.
This great book that I got from her is amazing, because there's just so much information. I mean, you can look at it one night and say, I'm going to go ahead and try that. And another night, you can thumb to another chapter and research things like what you do outside. There's just so much great information in the book. And we, of course, will have a link to that on our page once we transcribe the show in about 7 to 14 business days. So I do want to thank Kris Bordessa. And again, if you didn't get it from her, you can actually go to her website at KrisBordessa.com. But again, we will have a link to where you can buy the book when the show actually is transcribed and on our main page. Well, Google has updated the latest Chromecast with more HDR controls and improved Wi-Fi. They're hoping that this is going to really, increase sales. And by taking this new plateau that they're breaking, they're trying to bring the advanced video controls to give granular HDR formats, the resolution, the refresh rates, HDMI hot plug improvements, helping Chromecast to detect the best TV settings available really easily without any kind of fuss or hassle. And the Wi-Fi improvements for 5 gigahertz and also mesh networks were also improved in their system, and the Bluetooth audio stuttering improvements in some apps. And now the HDMI CEC can now be configured to turn on and off only the TV in settings. So that's pretty handy. And the security update for the Android security patch that came out. So there's a lot of great stuff. And it seems like Google is trying to deliver, well, not trying, they are, delivering us things that are going to give us more experiences to keep us on the edge of our chair. I mean, we heard before about virtual tourism and where that was going, but can you imagine what's going on with all these different things happening and people just, I guess, fighting to get outside? But now that we have things like virtual tourism and more types of ADR, HDR controls, I think it's really changing what's happening in our world. And
Absolutely.
I don't know, but Google is really, making lots of changes so that they can captivate the market and, of course, gain more sales. Yeah. Well, if any of you are following the FAA, my question is, will the FAA rules ground the drone deliveries? So you remember a while back, we actually talked about the drone and, what was happening. But my question to you is, are they going to be, grounded?
That's a good question, John.
Or curtailed? Because the problem that I see right now is all this stuff is happening, but, with the new rules being put in place, this is really going to shape America and maybe what Amazon and Walmart and many other retailers are going to do, because the classifications for being able to use aircraft are changing.
Yeah.
And drones are a type of aircraft. The rules require unmanned aircraft systems, they call it a UAS, to broadcast identification or location information, and allow operators of these small type drones to fly over people and vehicles, and at night under certain conditions. So this is a big step toward integration and developing rules that are far beyond the visual line of sight. And it's going to currently require a waiver. So there's a lot going on in this world. I think we're going to see a lot of new legal rules and laws that are popping up to helpfully make our world a little bit safer. But not only that, really create the space that drones need. This reminds me very similar, Marcus, to the way we have, public radio.
Yeah.
And by public radio, I'm talking about what emergency responders use, where you have to be licensed to use these radios and communicate, and how certain licenses can operate on specific channels and frequencies. Same thing is happening, Marcus, with the FAA and these drone deliveries. I think it's going to come down to a couple of things. Safety, but ultimately, I think it's going to come down to somebody getting a little bit more money.
It's always
and
the
that
money.
is what it's going to be
to
control what happens. Because anytime there's something and a regulation can be imposed, it seems like everybody out there wants to go do something, but then they pull back because the bureaucratic agencies decide they want to make some more money, and they're going to create some rule which nobody really understands.
Right.
But yet, if you want to do that, then you have to comply with those particular rules and guidelines, or you will lose the ability to operate your device or perform a certain action or whatever have you. I don't know where our time goes, Marcus, but we are just about out of time. This has been an amazing show. I definitely want to thank Kris Bordessa for coming. I think it was amazing how, we could learn about everything that she was talking to us about, and just letting people know that in our life, it's more than, just doing things to keep the land and to live a happy and healthy life, but to really be resourceful about what our land and our world has. And this leads me to a great motivational tip that I gave just a few days ago. And you might have heard of it. And it is, give a man fish, he'll eat for a day or two, maybe more, depending on how much fish you give him. But teach a man to fish, and he will be able to eat for life.
Yeah.
Are you a generator or are you a taker? In this world, it's important that we're a generator so we can put back what we take out. Well, Marcus, it has been another great show. I guess we have to say goodbye. Listen, if you have a product and you would like me to unbox it, please go to jmor.com, click on the reach out button at the right, fill out the form, and let us know. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, let us know that as well. Remember, our show is all about education. It's not a place to sell. So if it's your motive to come on the show to try to get sales, well, we're not the show for you. But if you'd like to inspire our audience and teach them something, we'd be more than happy to talk with you, and you can send us a pitch about why you should be on the show. I hope that you all stay happy, healthy, have a great rest of the weekend that is starting very soon. And most importantly, I hope you have the time to go outside and be grateful and just bask in this wonderful world that we're in and give thanks. Because a lot of people out there have challenges. And even if you're saying right now, life has been hard for me, I want you to understand one thing. There's people out there that have it even harder. So be grateful for all the blessings you have, whether that be skills you have, whether that be money you have, whether that be friends, family, etc. It doesn't matter. Just be grateful for the things you have in life, and more things will be put in your path. I'm John C. Morley, serial entrepreneur. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And I will be back next Friday night. And next Friday night, Marcus, we have another great guest, as I'm sure you know. And if you want to know who that guest is, well, I'm going to tell you who that guest is.
Yeah.
That guest that's coming next week is another amazing guest. We have guests lined up, ladies and gentlemen, to be on our show for quite a while, and we are just so grateful that that we're able to bring these people to you, because it is amazing when we can share this information out with you. We are going to be, Marcus, I cannot believe with everything happening that we're going to be in the month of May.
Yes, we
And
are.
that is going to be
Yes.
May 7th. Yes,
Impressive.
you heard me correct.
Impressive.
May 7th. And we're going to have another interesting gentleman that'll be on from China, Leonardo Mara. He's going to talk to us. So again, we have a great show for you next week as well. And if you're wondering what else is coming up in May, well, I'm going to tell you. On the 14th, we actually have John R. Dallas Jr., who actually worked for a major title insurance company. On the 21st, we have Krista Botsford Crowdy, who's going to tell us a little bit what she's been doing with COVID in her business. And on the 28th, we have Sarah Robertson. And if you have kids in school, or they're going to be entering college very soon, or just people in high school, you're not going to want to miss that day. Sarah has been very involved in the recruiting industry. She wrote a great book we're going to talk about, and she talks about your soundbite, your student soundbite. She was also involved when they had those challenges of people and their parents trying to basically falsify information, and the students willingly submitted it to get into colleges because it wasn't really them. We're going to learn more about that. We're going to talk about a soundbite and how your child needs to have the right soundbite, and it needs to match the credentials that you send them, or that college recruiter is going to basically not accept you, and you might get in a lot of trouble. I am John C. Morley, serial entrepreneur, national talk show host, and it is a pleasure to be with you. And I will be back next Friday night, May 7th at 5:30 p.m. Be well, everyone, and have yourself a wonderful weekend. Thank you for tuning in to the JMOR Weekly Technology Show, where we answer your questions about how technology is supposed to work, and sometimes why you have challenges getting it to work that way. For more IT support and tips, just text IT support to 888-111. That's IT support to 888-111, and you'll get tips on technology. I'll see you next week right here on the JMOR Tech Talk Show. Remember, JMOR.com.